All right, fam, we're going to get started with today's lesson 23, hunger and thirst for righteousness. Today we're talking about grief and truth. And so we have to understand, like, one of the only true cures for grief, true cure, not oh, I'm okay with it, oh, I'm fine with it, but no, I'm truly healed. I truly have peace with it. I'm not sensitive to it anymore. I can talk about, who's passed and what's going on and all these things. It's truth. There is no true healing when it comes to death and grief, but in truth. And so let's go ahead and get into it real quick. So 2 Samuel 12:15-17 says, So Nathan went to his house. Then the Lord struck the child that Uriah's widow bore to David, so that he was very sick. David therefore inquired of God for the child, and David fasted and went and lay all night on the ground. The elders of his household stood beside him in order to raise him up from the ground, but he was unwilling and would not eat food with them. And so here we are. We have David, his child. We just got done with the story about him and Bathsheba, and obviously we had the situation where he set up Uriah to be killed. He ends up having his child by Bathsheba, but now the Lord has struck the child with sickness, and he's very ill. Okay, and so when David hears about this, David begins to become into a grieving mode. Before this child's even died, he's in a grieving mode. He begins to fast. And he said he laid all night on the ground. He said they stood beside him in order to raise him up from the ground, but he was unwilling and would not eat food with them. He would not eat anything. He wouldn't get off the ground. He was grieving. Grieving. Okay? And so let's keep going in the story. We're going to read a little bit and then we'll talk. It says, Then it happened on the seventh day that the child died. And the servants of David were afraid to tell him that the child was dead. For they said, Behold, while the child was still alive, we spoke to him, and he did not listen to our voice. How then can we tell him that the child is dead, since he might do himself harm? So they were so worried about David and how stressed out he was about his child when he was sick and he wasn't even dead yet, that when he died, they didn't even want to tell him. They're like, listen, do you see what he looked like before he died and he was just sick? And now we have to tell him his son died? This man's going to kill himself. But that's what they thought. Let's keep going. So then it says, but when David saw that his servants were whispering together, David perceived that the child was dead. So David said to his servants, Is the child dead? And they said, He is dead. So David arose from the ground, washed, anointing himself, and changed his clothes, and he came into the house of the Lord and worshipped. Then he came to his own house, and when he requested, they set food before him, and he ate. So, child has died. He sees them whispering. He says, Is he dead? And they tell him he's dead. When they tell him he's dead, he gets up off the ground. He cleans himself up. He worships the Lord, and then he comes to sit down to eat. Then his servant said to him, What is this thing that you have done? While the child was alive, you fasted and wept. But when the child died, you arose and ate food. He said, While the child was still alive, I fasted and wept. For I said, Who knows, the Lord may be gracious to me, that the child may live. But now he has died. Why should I fast? Can I bring him back again? I will go to him, but he will not return to me. And so, the basis of this story is grief and truth. 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 And so, in saying this, we have to understand that we have David here, who is, obviously you have someone you love who's on their deathbed. You're going to be stressed out. You're going to be in a grieving state. You're going to be brought low. He was brought low. But everyone thought that, okay, when we tell him this child has died, it's going to be even worse. Because that's what the flesh is like usually, right? Is that most of us, even when the person's sick, you may be stressed out, you may be down or whatever it is, but then when the person dies, you usually act more hysterical about the person passing, right? But when you are a man or woman of truth, you do not live in the same patterns of the world. You do not live in the same patterns of the world. You do not feel the same stresses. You do not have the same griefs because of your belief in what reality really is. We have to understand that believing in Jesus Christ is believing in a whole different reality. than people of the flesh believe. People of the flesh believe that you die and then there's this huge mystery. They have no idea, so they fear what they don't know. It says in the Bible that people become angry at what they do not understand. And so we have to understand that when the people in the flesh, they have no idea. They have no idea what's going on after you die. They have no hope about life after death. They have no understanding about where people go and what happens. But you, who are a man or woman of truth, you know. And you've been told, it's been revealed to you. Jesus Christ told you. And it's written all over this glorious word of God. But the real question is always, do you believe it though? Because I'm trying to tell you, this is how so many of us get deceived by the enemy, and the enemy uses our friends and family and people in our flesh to deceive us. Because Jesus Christ revealed to you and told you, listen, I know what's going to happen. Listen, you believe in me, I'm going to save you. You're going to go to heaven. And he's already told you, listen, there's going to be a judgment day. And then there's going to be a new heaven, a new earth. He's told you very clearly what the plot is and what's going on. But then we have people who are in their flesh, who are in disbelief, who they just don't believe. And sadly, as many Christians also who walk around in disbelief and like they just don't believe, and they walk around in ignorance, act like they don't know when they have it right in front of them. But you have to understand that's going to be one of the enemy's greatest tools in your life, to use lukewarm people who are quote unquote believers, lukewarm, and using people who are in disbelief to make you feel like you do not know the reality of life after death. But you do know. And Jesus Christ did come and reveal to you what the truth is. But I'm trying to tell you, the only way you can have peace with death and peace and healing from grief is 1000% belief in the truth that Jesus Christ has revealed to us. If you decide to not believe that truth, you'll never have peace with death. Now let's go ahead and get into this a little bit. Let's talk. And so Hebrews 2:14-15, it says this: therefore, since the children share in flesh and blood, he himself likewise also partook of the same, that through death he might render powerless him who had the power of death, that is the devil, and might free those who through fear of death were subject to slavery all their lives. And so the end of this is what's very important. I love this. It says, to free those who through fear of death were subject to slavery all their lives. I don't know if you understand, but this is all of humanity. All of humanity has lived in fear of death. Only Jesus Christ can set you free from the fear of death. Only Jesus Christ. And we're going to come back to the scripture in a second, but John 8:31-32 says, so Jesus was saying to those Jews who believed him, if you continue in my word, then you are truly disciples of mine, and you will know the truth, and the truth will make you free. And so as in Hebrews he talks about, and he says that he came to set us free from the fear of death, who've been subject to slavery all their lives. Because you fear death, you have been enslaved to death. Because you fear it, it's been enslaving you in the way you live life. But Jesus Christ says, if you continue in my word, then you will know the truth, and the truth will make you free. So understand, this whole freeing process is not some Houdini. It's not clap my hands, alakazam, you're free. That's not what he said. He said, if you continue in my word, then you are truly disciples of mine, and you will know the truth, and the truth will make you free. So he says, first you have to continue in his word. So continue means I'm journeying, which means I'm going every day. I'm pushing forward. I'm reading in his word. He says, as you continue in my word, then you will know the truth. So first, you have to dedicate yourself to a journey with his word. Then he says, secondly, after you've dedicated yourself, then you'll know the truth. So he says, listen, I'm not going to let you know the truth if you haven't dedicated yourself. So dedicate yourself. Then you will know the truth. And then the third thing he says, and the truth will make you free. And so we have to understand it's by his word that we are freed from the slavery and fear of death. It's simply by continuing in his word, and we gain knowledge of truth, which sets us free from our fears when we know the truth. When we know the truth. And so we're going to go down here. Ecclesiastes 7:4 says, the mind of the wise is in the house of mourning, while the mind of fools is in the house of pleasure. And so the reason why I'm bringing this up to you is that I want you to understand the reality of being wise or being a fool in this life. Is that many of us walk around and we do not want to think about the reality of dying. You don't want to think about the reality of what happens after you die. You don't want to think about the reality of Judgment Day. You don't want to think about the reality of a lake of fire. You don't want to think about the reality of new heaven, new earth. But he says you are wise if your mind is in this place. And you're a fool if your mind's in a place of pleasure, which means just what makes me feel good while I'm here. You're a fool. And so we have to understand, I'm going to go here and let's wrap up what I was just saying a second ago. Acts 13:22. After he removed him being Saul, he raised up David to be their king, concerning whom he also testified and said, so this is God's testimony about David. I have found David, the son of Jesse, a man after my heart, who will do all my will. So we know that David was not a fool. And we also know that in these passages around 2 Samuel, which probably we're going to our next lesson, we have a woman who speaks up. This woman that speaks up to David and says to him, you are wise as the angel of God. We know that David was wise. And if you don't understand by now, we know that his mind was in the house of mourning. Why? Because he wrote Psalms. And Psalms is completely about life and death. Psalms completely about God and living in this world and being brought in this world and being taken out of this world and persecution and just reality of eternal life. So many eternal things in Psalms. We know that David's mind was in the house of mourning. It was not in the house of pleasure. But we have to understand why it is. Why was it that David had peace when his son passed? He didn't have peace when he was sick. But even David said, listen, I hoped that the Lord might do something different. But now that I see that he's gone, the most beautiful line about this, I love this line that David says. He says, why should I fast? Can I bring him back again? I will go to him, but he will not return to me. This line is simple truth. Because of David's belief in the truth, he had peace because he understood. Many of us walk around still hoping and saying that, oh, my person that passed is my angel. And then you say, oh, well, he's here with me and he comes to me and he does all these things. You don't understand that in life and death, it's called a chasm. Jesus talks about it in Luke. I should have put the scripture on here. A chasm. When you die, you cannot cross back over from where you went. Which means if you go to hell, you can't cross over to heaven after you already been sent to hell. You can't cross down to hell after you already been sent to heaven. And yes, we know the Lord has the power to bring people back, but we also have to understand that that's very few, very, very rare. Like most, we're talking about a reality. Yes, some people can be brought back from the dead, but we have to understand the reality is that 99.999999999%, unless the Lord himself is there, Unless the Lord himself is there. Once you go, you can't come back. But that's something that David understood, and he knew the truth. And so he had peace. But this is the other part of his peace. I'm going to tell you some essential parts of this one sentence at the end that's so powerful. I will go to him, but he will not return to me. So David not only understood that one could not cross back over, right? And then listen, he's passed. He's not coming back here. But the other thing that he understood was that there's life after death. He says, I will go to him, but he will not return to me. He's literally saying that, listen, I will go to him, which means there's a him who's still alive that's somewhere. He says, I can go to him, but he cannot go to me. So that was David's second proclamation of truth that helps us see clearly why he had peace, because he knew and believed that although his child had passed from this physical world, he was still alive. He was still alive. He was still alive. And so, another thing I would say about David in this part, so one, we have him with the reality of crossing over. Two, we have him with the reality that life still goes on after you die. He says, I can go to him, but he won't come to me, right? But this third thing, though, this third thing about David, why he had peace, is an acceptance of God's will. Acceptance is that he said he fasted and he prayed and he was in this grieving state and while his child was sick. But when his child passed, this the thing is, you can know the truth, but there's a third thing though. Have you accepted the truth? Have you accepted that once someone goes, they will not be able to come here, but you can go to them? Have you accepted that life continues on after you leave here? But it's the things that some of us believe, some of us fall into these weird beliefs. And these weird beliefs are what give you stress and what stress you out. Because you just won't accept the truth of what God has told you. Some of y'all walk around looking for your siblings in bugs and dogs and cats and saying, oh, I think he's a cat now. And you still have no peace with that passing because you have not accepted the truth. The truth. And so I'll read this again. I'll read my last slide and we'll be done today. John 8:31 and 32. So Jesus was saying to those Jews who had believed him, if you continue in my word, then you are true disciples of mine, and you will know the truth, and the truth will make you free. If you continue in my word. So now we're going to read the most upfront word from Christ in Revelation about the reality of us and after we die. Reality. And I saw the dead, the great and the small, standing before the throne. And books were opened, and another book was opened, which is the book of life. And the dead were judged in the things which were written in the books, according to their deeds. And the sea gave of the dead which were in it, and the death and Hades gave the dead which were in them. And they were judged, every one of them according to their deeds. And so, when you read this, we see that there are the great and the small that stand before the throne, right? The dead, the great and the small. These people are passed on. They're great and small. They stand before the throne. That's one place we know people go. Another place that says that people go, it says that and the sea of the dead which were in it. So we know there's a place, an eternal place called the sea that dead people are resting, right? And then it says, death and Hades gave the dead which were in them. So we know people are in death or Hades, which some of us call what is hell right now. That's what the Bible calls death and Hades. We know people are in death and Hades right now. And every last one of them was judged according to their deeds. It's right in front of you. It's right in front of you, the reality of life after death. It's right in front of you. The only real question is, do you believe? And are you going to attain your peace? Are you going to accept your peace? Because you know, you can know. You can know. But do you believe and do you accept it? And I'm telling you that these eternal things are the things that David believed and he accepted so he could have peace when his own child passed. So, such a peace that people were, how do you have peace now? How are you eating? Why are you not grieving? How are you not still laying on the floor after he's passed away? Because I know the truth. And there's nothing my grieving is going to do to change the truth. Nothing. So he accepted his comfort in his belief in truth. Matthew 5 says, blessed are those who are grieving, for they should be comforted. But the only way you're going to accept that comfort is if you believe. Do you believe is the question. And so with that being said, this is the end of lesson 23, Hunger and Thirst for Righteousness. It's called Grief and Truth. The only true cure for grief and for our fear of death is in truth. And that truth will set you free from so much in your life. Some of us don't understand that just by believing a simple truth is this. Not, I won't call it simple. It's pretty simple. It's right in front of your face. But just from us believing the truth, there's so many things of grief and depression that have been held on you that have molded who you are today, that if you just accept it, you find so much healing for. And some of us have never even met who we really are because of grief. When are you going to accept that healing and believe the truth so you can walk forward and be free? Lastly, we do tithe and offering, and so we pull $200 with to ensure that God's work can and will continue through this ministry. Secondly, we redistribute all funds back out evenly to all they gave. And so what happens is on Monday, I pull the money, and what I do is I take $200 out of the money and I distribute out to those who work in the ministry that $200. And then what I do is I divide the money equally back out to everyone else that gave after the $200. And so it's a really great program. We encourage you to save 10% because you are a disciple of Christ and your work for God matters, and you're going to need that to do His work. We also implore you to give 10%, especially if this ministry is feeding you and helping you walk strongly in the Lord. Give your 10%, and we'd love for you to be a part of our tithe and offering program. And so we definitely love you guys. This is lesson 23, Hunger and Thirst for Righteousness. Have a blessed day.